Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Srila Prabhupada ki, Ramanujacarya ki, Gaura Premanandi. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. We'll just recite text 16 of chapter 8. We recite it every morning. Bahu Janma Kariyadi Shravana Kirtanam Tabutana Paya Krishna Pade Premadana Bahu Janma Kariyadi Shravana Kirtanam Tabutana Paya Krishna Pade Premadana Bahu Janma Kariyadi Shravana Kirtana Tabutana Paya Krishna Pade Premadana Bahu Janma Kariyadi Shravana Kirtana Tabutana Paya Krishna Pade Premadana Bahu Janma Kariyadi Shravana Kirtana Tabutana Paya Krishna Pade Premadana Bahu Janma Kariyadi Shravana Kirtana Tabutana Paya Krishna Pade Premadana. Bahu Janma Kariyadi Shravana Kirtana Tabutana Paya Krishna Pade Premadana Bahu Janma Kariyadi Shravana Kirtana Tabutana Paya Krishna Pade Premadana. Bahu, many, Janma, births, Kare, does, Yadi, if, Shravana, hearing, Kirtana, chanting, Tabu, still, Ta, in spite of, Na, does not, Paya, get, Krishna Pade, unto the lotus feet of Krishna, Premadana, love of Godhead. Translation. If one is infested with the 10 offences in the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, despite his endeavour to chant the holy name for many births, he will not get the love of Godhead, which is the ultimate goal of this chanting. There's a nice purport here about offences to the holy name, about the nature of the holy name, and about the use of the tongue for 2 purposes, vibrating and tasting. So we'll leave that for tomorrow or somebody to elaborate on that. I've wanted to talk about Sri Ramanujacarya, his appearance day today. And the end conclusion of the purport, I think, will tie in. Ramanujacarya is known as the Sampradaya Acharya. He's the most prominent teacher, guide, in the school known as the Sri Sampradaya. The different schools teaching the philosophy, the culture of Vaishnavism are four bona fide schools coming from Krishna. The Brahma, Lakshmi, another way of addressing Lakshmi is Sri, so Sri Sampradaya, Lakshmi Sampradaya, Rudra, another name for Lord Shiva, Rudra, and the Nimbaka. Now Nimbaka is the Acharya, so the Kumara Sampradaya. So today we're going to focus on the Sri Sampradaya. Originally coming from Lakshmi Devi, the goddess of fortune. So these lines of teaching, these schools of thought, are from an original bona fide source. Along the way, there can be different splinter groups, offshoots, schisms, and the Acharya often appears to reunite, to consolidate, to give a foundation or a structure for the re-establishment of the original pure teachings of that line of thought. Ramanujacarya, he performed such a function. So this was about 1000 AD in the Western calendar. This was his epoch. Prior to that, Buddhism, 2,500 years ago, had stepped into the picture. After 5,000 years ago, Lord Krishna was here, and the worship of Radha and Krishna, the worship of Krishna, was the main thrust of Krishna consciousness. Of course, that had been influenced by time, by speculation, and at a certain point, the Vedas, which recommend cow sacrifice and horse sacrifice, became hijacked. Those original sacrifices were hijacked for the purpose of sense gratification. In all traditions, there are restrictions on what you do with your tongue, what you can and can't eat. The rules within the Judeo-Christian religion of kosher, that you can't take flesh with milk. So they kosher rules in order to try and keep them separate. Ultimately, the best solution is just practice vegetarianism, because then you don't create an offence. So at the time before Lord Buddha appeared, these animal slaughters had become rampant, just like nowadays. There are more slaughterhouses than churches, more butcher shops at least. But still, there's not enough food supply. People are scrambling for their daily meals. So at the time before Lord Buddha appeared, the misuse of the Vedas become so obnoxious that in the name of the Vedas, people were opening butcher shops. The temples would become a place where you could get your meat. Just recently, before the big flood up in Kedarnath, where the big Lord Shiva Murti, huge, was flooded, washed away, the local Durga temple had prided themselves that they had managed to sacrifice, to offer many, many animals. Normally they would do 500. This year they got up to about, a big number, in the thousands. And very shortly afterwards, a week or so after that, devastation. This is how pleased Goddess Durga was with their sacrifice. So at the time of just before the advent of Lord Buddha, this was also the situation. Rampant animal sacrifice, so-called in the name of the Vedas. The Vedas prescribe that to sacrifice a cow and a horse is not for the sake of sense gratification, not to eat their flesh, but so that the old animal, when brought before the sacrificial fire and offered into the fire, is then rejuvenated as a symptom, as a measuring stick that the sacrifice was effective, that the mantras were chanted properly. The older animal would enter into the fire and would come out in a rejuvenated form. That was an animal sacrifice. So in the distorted idea that no, the Vedas say you can sacrifice animals. Okay, therefore let us hold us while let's just eat animals. So Lord Buddha came along and said, stop this. He preached the philosophy of ahimsa, non-violence. He said, stop this. And that's what it says, throw out the Vedas, cancel the Vedas, stop following the Vedas, follow me. I will help you to become uplifted and sanctified again. Many people started to practice Buddhism, to follow the Buddha. His teachings are sort of moral principles. Don't kill, don't hurt. They're sub-religious principles, so they're easier to follow. And nowadays there are many people. Buddhism is one of the most rapidly spreading cultures, and it's because people can say, I'm a Buddhist. Well, what do you do? Practice Buddhism. I meditate. I'm even the leader, one of the very popular leaders of the Buddhist organization, he doesn't practice vegetarianism. And it's explained away in, the principle is that we should just accept what people give us. We have a begging bowl, and whatever people put in the bowl, then we accept it. If they put meat in there, then we accept it. But that's pretty lame. If your principles are that you should not cause suffering to other living entities, then you can object and you can present that to people and they will stop doing that. Just like the Dalai Lama was on an airplane and Bhavananda was on the same airplane. He observed the Dalai Lama accepting his meals. Everybody was going, the stewardess were going around, would you like veg or non-veg? And he said, I want the non-veg. So Bhavananda went up to him and challenged him, Your Holiness, what's this? And he explained the principle of accepting no, this is not the principles of Buddhism. This is not the principles of ahimsa. So Lord Buddha, he came to try and stop that rampant animal slaughter. And he did it by casting aside the Vedas and saying, just have faith in me. Lord Buddha, incarnation of Krishna, have faith in him. It's the same end goal, but avoiding the misunderstanding in the middle. After some time, Lord Buddha and his teachings were kicked out of India because they are ultimately atheistic. Atheistic, they don't recognize the existence of the soul. Their 9 principles are very interesting. Reincarnation and things like that, and illusion. The ultimate goal is illusion. Everything's a void. So that was not tolerated in this land of personalism, Punya Bhumi, India. So it was kicked out beyond the shores of India and took up roots in Thailand and Japan and other places. After the time of Lord Buddha, then another great Acharya appeared, Shankaracharya, who was an incarnation of Lord Shiva. And he had come on the request of Lord Krishna to re-establish people's faith in the Vedas. And he did that in a covert way. He covered the meaning. He presented the Vedas, but in a indirect method. The direct method says that surrender unto me. Worship me. Me. I'm a person, worship me. But then the indirect way is to say, well, it's not actually to me you're supposed to surrender, but to the unborn within me. It's a covered word jugglery. So Lord Shiva, as Shankaracharya, he employed that method. And he established the philosophy of monism, impersonalism. It's all one. So then this was shifting the consciousness of the people closer back to the Vedas, but it wasn't sufficient. So Ramanujacarya, he was invested with the potency to very powerfully change people's conception of who they were, who is the Supreme, and what's their relationship with the Supreme. In order to have such a massive effect, you have to have a very powerful personality. We've had Lord Buddha, Lord Krishna himself, we've had Lord Shiva. Ramanujacarya, Rama is Krishna, Anuja means Lakshman, means a limb, an expansion of Lord Krishna. So Ramanuja means Rama, Lakshman means an incarnation, an expansion of Lord Balaram. Ramanuja is an expansion of Lord Balaram. Lord Balaram, he appeared as Lord Balaram, Krishna's first expansion with Krishna. Then he appeared in Ram's pastimes as Lakshman. He's appeared a third time, and he's appeared 500 years ago as Lord Nityananda. So Ramanujacarya is another type of expansion of Lord Balaram, an expansion of Sheshanag. So he's very powerful. He appeared, his mother was a daughter or a sister of a great devotee known as Shailapurna. Shailapurna, he was a disciple of Jamunacharya. Jamunacharya is the person who was very powerfully presenting the philosophy of who we are and what's our relationship with God prior, in the pre-Ramanuja days. Jamunacharya, a very interesting personality, recognized for his scholarly abilities and his intelligence. So he naturally gravitated towards very elevated teachers, and he was trained up. As a young child, 9 years old, he was touring, and he came to a kingdom, and the court pundit, the main teacher there, the main guru there, was bogus, was teaching like a distorted philosophy. This is what happens nowadays in the villages in India. The head, what's his name? The head, Mahant? Can't hear something. Head of the village or the head? Sarapandi. Okay, so he's the head of the village. Is he the philosophical head, or is he the administrative head? Administrative head. So he's got a teacher, he's got a priest. So his guru. So they're teaching the villagers, you follow my administrator, he's going to look after you, and the principles are this and this and this. But you have to worship me, and you have to give me all of the alms, you have to regard me as good as God. So it's distorted. We went to Sri Lanka just after the tsunami hit, and they have Sri Vaishnava tendencies and Buddhist tendencies, and we were given a guide. He was a priest in one of the temples, so he was translating for the local people whenever we would speak, and we would say Sri Krishna Bhagavan, and he would say Paramatma Supersoul. He just didn't have that conception. It wasn't within his heart to be able to present that concept. So the way to uplift the people in that village is to come along and to expose the shortcomings of such a teacher, who generally hightails it out of there because he's created so much nonsense, he's going to get so much repercussions, and then to establish the proper higher understanding of what is the nature of reality, who is God, and how is it, what's our service relationship with him. So Jamunacharya, at the age of 9, had a reputation. He visited a kingdom. He noticed that the main teacher there was speaking nonsense, and in the middle of a discourse before the king and the queen, he objected. 9 years old, he stood up and said, well, something wrong here. So the teacher challenged him, got all irate, but the queen, attracted to young Ramanujacarya, said, "No, let him speak." And he challenged the teacher, and the teacher said, "Well, I don't accept that." He said, "Okay, here's a challenge to you. If you can answer these 3 questions, then I'll accept your teachings." So the young boy proposed, "Your queen is a barren woman." She had children, or her son. She's a barren woman. "The king is not the ruler of this kingdom. He's not the ruler of everything." And the 3rd question?
She has many husbands.
Sorry?
The queen has many husbands.
The queen is not chaste. The queen is not chaste. So the pundit thought for a while, well, what can I say? The queen's wife is barren. The queen's barren. The king is not the rule of the kingdom, and the queen is not chaste. What's going on? And so the queen, rather than telling him to go and cut his head off, she said, "Well, you explain, young lad. What's the actual truth?" So he, through clear arguments, described that within the scriptures, a woman who has only one child is still to be considered barren. You've got to have a few kids in order to be regarded as a good mum. Okay. Whew. Second one, the king is not the ruler. The king is the ruler of this kingdom, but he's not the ruler of the whole earth. He's not the ultimate king. Okay, all right. And the queen is unchaste. The queen is unchaste. Prabhu, can you give the explanation? How is the queen unchaste?
Because according to the Vedas, when she married the king, she also married the demigod, and she's like something like this. She's married to
the demigods. Yeah, within the body of the woman, demigods, for protection, they take up residence. So at the time of marriage, so she had these other men living with her before that time. So at the time of marriage, the priests request them, okay, now she's going to be put into the care of her husband, now ask them to go away. So that's, wow, okay, so the queen was so overjoyed with the explanation and so overjoyed with the fact that he was somebody who was with substance and was bona fide and was following the scriptures. She said, okay, give him half the kingdom. You want to reward him, give him half the kingdom. So this 9-year-old boy, he became the king. And he got caught up in all of that royalty and pomp, and his knowledge, his understanding, his realization was still there, but it became dormant. So he was needed in the whole business of re-establishing the Siddhanta, the conclusion. So after some time, his well-wishers, they worked out a way to try and influence him. But they couldn't get to him because he was the king. So one of the disciples, they worked out a system. Okay, every day he would bring 3 kilos of this beautiful spinach, and he would bring it to the royal kitchen and he'd give it to the cook and say, cook it for the king. So every day for 2 years he would do this, and then one day he stopped. After 3 days, Ramanujacarya, who'd been given the title Al-Bandaru, he asked, "Where's my spinach?" He'd become so attached to it, and then they explained what was happening, and he called the disciple in. "Well, what's going on?" And he said, "Well, actually, I've got a greater gift for you. Your father has left you with a priceless treasure, but you have to become qualified." So he preached to him for 3 months, told him about the principles of the Bhagavad Gita, and then eventually he decided, okay, I'm getting out of here, I'm leaving the kingdom, and he went off with the disciple there, and they went to the temple of Ranganath. And he was presented, here is your treasure. So he became then back realigned to his original destiny to spread this understanding. And he preached very strongly. He noticed Ramanuja as a child, because Ramanuja, he as a young child, he also displayed great scholarly abilities, but he was put under the guidance of a teacher whose name was Yadava Prakash, who was a Mayavadi, an impersonalist. And Also, Ramanujacarya, he couldn't tolerate his explanations. An example of one of his explanations was, there's a 3-line couplet in the scriptures. So Yadava Prakash, he interpreted it that the Lord's face is like the backside of a monkey. And he started explaining this. Ramanujacarya was massaging his guru, and his guru started feeling this hot thing on his back. And he, what's going on? And he turned around, his disciple was crying. You have 2 types of tears. There's hot tears and cold tears. Hot tears are distress. Cold tears are spiritual. Joyful, yeah. Cold tears are joyful. Hot tears are distress. So it was hot tears burning in his back. Yadava Prakash, what's happening? And Ramanujacarya was so disturbed by the explanation that the Lord's face is like the backside of the monkey. He contested with his guru, he challenged him, and he said, well, actually that verse means that the Lord's face is like a blooming red lotus flower. So Jamunacharya noticed Ramanujacarya in the association following this guru, and he became okay. He thought, well, why is he following him? But then his assistant, his disciple, Jamunacharya's disciple, said, in the near future he will do everything. Don't worry about him. Eventually, Ramanujacharya, he became free from the control of Yadava Prakash through different means. He disturbed him so much that his teacher wanted to poison him. He wanted to drown him. He took him to the Kumbh Mela and he was going to put him into and drown him and tell everybody that he'd drowned. He'd learned about it. He had a cousin brother, Govinda, and he managed to escape. They disappeared. They went on that adventure. They didn't come back with the guru, and then they turned up a month later and he said, "Oh, you're back? Oh, I'm sorry. We were so upset. We thought you'd drowned." And then he came back and he tried to poison him again, the Charanamrita. He put poison in the Charanamrita. And his brother said, it's because the priest was shaking when he was going to offer the poison to Ramanujacharya. So he said, I understand there's poison here, but I'll take it anyway. And he took it, and the poison didn't have any effect on him. So eventually, after trying to discredit Ramanujacharya, Yadava Prakash, he was very disturbed. He became a disciple. He just couldn't overcome. So Ramanujacharya, he heard about Jamunacharya. Jamunacharya was aware of him, and Jamunacharya wanted to impart his understanding to Ramanujacharya. He wasn't ready at that time. So then he sent one of his disciples. There's Shailapurna, who was an uncle of Ramanujacharya. There's Kanchipurna. There's a few different disciples. And 5 of them were invested with passing on the teachings to the next acharya, to Ramanujacharya. So they came and they informed him that Jamunacharya wants to see you. You should come. He was a little bit late. They eventually, Mahapurna, they managed to get Ramanujacharya. They got together and they got out of the obligations they were in, and they headed towards the place of Jamunacharya. Ramanujacharya, he made his headquarters in Kanchi in South India. So he headed to see Jamunacharya, and Jamunacharya, he was conscious. He was famous for writing Stotra Ratna. Stotra Ratna, it's jewels glorifying Krishna, lots of verses. So they headed to his place where he was residing, and they arrived after travelling for 8 days, just at the time that Jamunacharya left his body. So they collapsed, they became unconscious, they were so disturbed. We missed meeting Jamunacharya. Then the disciples of Jamunacharya, they brought them back to consciousness, and they said, pay attention. So Ramanujacharya, he looked at the hand of Jamunacharya, who was going to pass on the teaching, and he noticed that his 3 fingers were tight in a fist. And he pondered that and he made a vow. I vow that I will propound Bhagavad Dharma amongst all the people. And Ramanujacarya's one finger straightened out. I vow that I will create another Parashara. Parashara is another incarnation of Lord Ram. His disciple Parashara. Another finger came out. And then he said, I vow that I will write the Sri Bhashya, a commentary from the Vaishnava point of view on the Vedanta Sutra. Third finger came out. So he had pleased his teacher. He had the association of his teacher's disciples who were imparting the principles of Vishishta Dvaita, non-dual, Vishishta specialized, non-dual understanding of the relationship between the living entity, the jiva, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Previously, Shankaracharya, his principle was that the jiva, the living entity, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the jiva is also known as Atma. Atma means soul. So the Atma and the Paramatma, or the Supreme Soul, are one, according to Shankaracharya. They're one, but there's a qualifying statement. One in quality, but not one in quantity. We have the same qualities, we're spiritual, but in minute quantity compared to the Supreme Paramatma. So Ramanujacarya, he was presenting that philosophy, and he wrote the Sri Bhashya in order to counter the previous commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, the Sarirakya Bhashya, written by Shankaracharya. So Ramanujacarya had a big job to do, and he did it exhaustively. He systematized Vaishnavism. Ramanujacarya was presenting the principles and getting the teaching.